Have you ever seen something from the corner of your eye that wasn't there when you looked? How about hearing from a friend of a friend that while they were out hiking somewhere, they thought they saw something impossible, but whenever they spoke to anyone about it, there was a simple explanation that just didn't satisfy? Well, my name is Jack, and this is my colleague Chris, and we are senior wardens for the Creature Conservation Initiative. We protect the world from the creatures of superstition and myth, but more importantly, we protect those same creatures from the world. So, hello, people. How are we doing? And how are you doing, Chris?
I am doing fantastic. I'm glad the year's over, to be honest. 2023 was not a good one for me, and I'm excited to start fresh with this exciting new episode.
Well, it was quite a busy year for us in the organisation, in the initiative, and as well as personal things, it takes a lot of effort, doesn't it?
It does.
But we are here and we are ready to get going. But we're going to start the year off talking about quite an interesting little creature that's weirdly well known, but not at the same time.
What does that mean?
Well, there's not a lot of information about the subject of our episode today, but it still found its way into quite a lot of popular culture. So probably only the people who know about it would actually notice it.
Okay. Do I know about it?
I don't think we've ever had you handle one of these. They're not high priority, serious, dangerous creatures or anything. They're quite simple to handle. They don't cause us that much difficulty when handling or containing or just in general being around them. But we're talking today about the Caladrius.
Caladrius. Sounds vaguely familiar, but I'm not really sure where I've heard that before. I feel like I've seen it in a video game, maybe? At least the name.
Yeah, well, there's actually a video game named Caladrius. There's been there has been characters in video games named Caladrius, and there has been various movies that all have the name Caladrius involved, or songs. It's one of those things where the people in the know like to slip it in because of what the Caladrius is all about. But
okay, I feel kind of left out because this sounds like something I should know. I feel like I've not done my homework.
Well, like I said, we don't have to deal with many of them. They hide themselves in plain sight, pretty much. But you'll understand that as I kind of describe them. But the Caladrius is a creature that originates around the kind of height of the Roman Empire. Or at least that's where a lot of the information that we have on it originates from. So it kind of falls under that Roman mythology. And it was known after then, up until recent times, to be a creature that resides in the courts of kings. But prior to it was a cave-dwelling water bird.
Okay, that's a lot to unpack there. Like, first of all, I'm not sure the Romans had kings. Like, history is not my strong suit, but I'm only aware of emperors and senates and stuff like that. Also an underground waterbird, was it?
Cave-dwelling waterbird.
A cave-dwelling waterbird. Oh, that's not a combination we have a lot of the time.
No.
Like, what separates it from a normal bird?
Well, there are some good reasons why it's known as a bird that would reside in the courts of kings, because it's one of these creatures with a very rare power.
Okay.
It has the power to take disease away from people.
Oh, wow. That sounds useful.
But this is actually one of those times when the myth is real. These birds do have the ability to take, a person's sickness, disease, illness away from them, but only if it decides to.
Okay. But they do it on purpose. It's not like a passive sucking up every illness in the area thing.
No, it is very much a conscious decision.
Okay.
But we'll kind of get onto that as we go along. It originated in that Roman mythological time, and it's actually managed to make its way all the way through kind of the medieval era to more modern times. And that's kind of where it comes into, it's a bird that resides in the court of kings.
Yeah.
But what makes it kind of, how do you hide something with the power to essentially cure anyone's disease?
That is a good question.
Well, it appears as a pure white bird. It's in kind of the medieval bestiaries. It's got no other colourings. Okay. Prior to the medieval bestiary kind of time, when obviously they were recording information, it did actually appear to pop up as the whole spectrum of colours. Oh. But throughout, whether it's evolution, whether it's a survival technique, or whether it's, just propaganda, they start to drop off to only being pure white in the myth.
Interesting. So just from my imagination here, is that, are we talking a pigeon size or more like bigger birds? Sesame Street big birds?
Well, that's another fun thing with them. What we know is, having interacted with them, they're about the same size as a dove or a seagull.
Okay.
But it was believed that you could mistake them for anything from a dove to a heron, a massive water bird.
That's quite the difference.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it is certainly a big difference. And the art historian Louis Roux, I think that's how you say his name, thought it could even be mistaken for a white plover, which is a bird I've never heard of, but sounds like it might fit.
Yeah, I've never heard of that either, but sure. White clover.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Are we sure that they were not drunk? Because there's a big difference between the dove and the heron.
Well, again, we know that the ones that we've encountered and the ones that we handle, they do have a bit of a range in size.
Okay.
But I personally believe that's a kind of an evolutionary trick for them. That's how they kind of stay hidden, because you tend to all kind of breeds and species tend to have like a few standard things. They tend to be within a certain size range, within a certain build, within all of this. But these birds do a very good job of hiding in plain sight. So I genuinely believe that this is them just slipping under the radar, and just the evolutionary traits that they have means that they just grow different sizes.
Okay, yeah.
Depending on a bird's own individual genetics.
Makes sense.
But like I say, these birds are quite rare. Again, not because they've been hunted or anything like that. They've actually stayed quite well out of the zeitgeist in that way.
Yeah.
There's not many hunters that know about them, let alone actually physically hunt them. But just because they don't breed very often. They're quite solitary creatures. They don't tend to pair off too often, so they don't tend to have many offspring. So there are quite a small number of them, but the population seems to stay pretty strong.
Okay. Have there ever been attempts to breed them? Because, a healing bird sounds like something that would be very useful.
Not in modern times, and nothing has ever been recorded about trying to breed them, but I suspect it's because you don't tend to find pairs very often. You don't tend to have more than one.
Yes, that's usually how it works.
Yeah, they're also quite capricious creatures. If they decide that they don't want to do something, they're not doing it.
Okay. So are they intelligent? Can you talk to them, or are they more like animals that happen to have this ability?
They are intelligent, but not in the sense that you can have, a full conversation with them. They do seem to understand what we're saying.
Okay.
But they don't seem to respond. But the reason why we kind of put them down as being quite intelligent is that the only way in which they can actually take disease or illness away from someone is to look that person in the eyes and basically kind of like lock the gaze with them and just stare. And over a period of time, that person seems to have the disease literally pulled out of them into the bird, at which point the bird appears to, and we're not too sure which one this is, either fly towards the sun, in which the disease seems to be burned out of the bird, or they just fly over a huge area of land and the disease appears to just be dispersed among the ether.
So they're raining down the common flu over the land.
Well, that's the weird thing about it. It doesn't seem to, create a plague or infection.
Okay.
It's like it breaks the disease down into smaller amounts, into tiny little molecules, and it just seems to get diffused into the atmosphere.
It's wild.
And becomes non-threatening. Because it's either that, or we believe that they're flying towards the damn sun.
Yeah,
that they don't seem to burn.
That does not seem likely. Then again, the entire sucking up diseases thing is not very likely as well, so who knows, to be honest.
The funny thing is, we do know that they do actually have the power to take people's diseases away.
Yeah, sure, I wasn't doubting that, but God knows I have no idea how the biology or physics of that work. So, for all I know, that bird could be flying to the sun twice a week.
Who knows, it could be. But the thing that makes it really, really interesting, though, and the reason why I say they're intelligent and a bit capricious, is that they make a conscious decision as to whether to take the disease away. They lock eyes with an ill individual, and they either decide to pull the disease out of that person by maintaining that gaze and, watching them, or they actively turn their head away and just walk away and let the person die.
Oh man, what a petty bird.
Yeah, this is one of those ones where we try to be quite nice with them because they do appear to be, as you say, petty.
Yeah.
They decide whether they're going to be helpful or not.
Do we have any idea what they base these decisions on?
Absolutely no idea. But some people have obviously decided that they want to add to the legend that these birds aren't going to be mean or evil or anything like that. Or, at some point I'm guessing someone basically got turned away from one of these birds and the bird did something and they tried to rationalize it. Because part of the myth, and this part is myth, is that apparently its poo is supposed to cure blindness.
Of course.
I mean, if I ever go blind, I'm sorry, I'm not rubbing it in my eyes.
That can't be healthy.
So, that is one thing where, I mean, if I'm perfectly honest, I don't know if any of the guys in the lab have ran tests, but I'm pretty certain that is one of those facts that aren't real.
I mean, even if it did work, you're still rubbing poo in your eyes, so that's gonna be a nasty infection at least.
Yeah, you might get your eyes back for about 2 minutes before the gangrene sets in.
Exactly. Oh, jeez. People come up with wild things.
Yeah. But it appears that essentially you have a bird here that can decide if you live or die. If you have a disease or some form of illness. And obviously, around the medieval times and towards the end of the Roman Empire, and more towards the Holy Roman Empire, Christianity kind of kicks in, and they try to rationalize these birds as actually being metaphors for Christ.
Okay. I thought it would be an angel or something because it's got wings, but sure, that works.
No, I mean, have you ever handled angels? They are terrifying.
I know. I mean, there's a reason they say be not afraid.
Yeah, well, they do not look like birds. But that's something
Sure.
for another day. But no, like, well, think of it like think how this sounds. Okay, you have an entity that takes away disease.
Yes.
That appears to you pure of heart because
Yes.
it's white and all of this absolutely perfect, complete perfection that can choose whether to allow someone to live or die. It's starting to sound quite religious and maybe towards Christ, especially seeing as Christianity tried to put in those who had the Caladrius turn away from them just happen to always be unrepentant sinners.
Of course. Probably in the same way that that all the women who would float on water would be witches or something around that.
Yeah. But essentially, they used it as a metaphor because it goes, if you think of like disease as, say, your sin and unrepentant sinners, it goes right down to the idea of Christ taking the sins of humanity into his perfect self to be sacrificed on the cross for forgiveness. Yeah. That's how they kind of likened these birds, because unlike, some pagan creatures like we were talking about, the Leshy and things, where these things might be dangerous or they might be against God's will or, being deities themselves, all of these kind of difficult to rationalize within Christianity kind of creatures that are out there. We have a creature that's basically potentially saving people's lives. You don't really want to get rid of that just because it doesn't really link with your religion, so
sure.
You tend to find a way to link it all in. But like I say, these birds were referenced before Christianity came to the Roman Empire. So this is, again, feels like one of those times when, as I say, they're just trying to link in something beneficial and try and make these kind of birds seem as emissaries of God or Christ. So
obviously, no other explanation.
Because it's around that time when the text starts saying that these birds are pure white. And here's the thing, having handled a few of them, they actually come in many, many different colours. They do go along the full spectrum.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there is, as is pretty much inevitable for texts of those times, you're going to have creatures that are pulled in and rationalized by religion, and, well, we have the truth from what we've seen, and very simply, it's a wonderful little bird that ranges in size by a certain degree, that does have the ability to heal people, and just lives. It doesn't cause any trouble. It potentially can save someone's life, but otherwise, it's just there.
So do people seek out this bird when they're ill, or does the bird come to them? How does that even work, that meeting?
Well, it does appear to be based on luck. You just happen to have to be in the right place at the right time for the birds to come out. They're not searching for people to heal, and like I say, they're capricious little creatures. They don't come and heal you because they feel like it's a need. They heal you because, I don't know, they feel like it at the time. Yeah. They like you, or you've been nice to them. Or they decide to turn away from you because you've not been nice to them. They have their own mind. And that kind of brings me on to one of my latest encounters with them.
Okay.
We had a creature. We had someone who was doing faith healing. It crops up around the time. Yeah. It's a common thing for the initiative to have to go and at least investigate people who appear to suddenly have healing powers. Sometimes we have to make sure they're not shapeshifters. Sometimes we have to just make sure that they're just people who are a bit charlatans. Sometimes we have to make sure that they don't have a creature in servitude to them. Because obviously all of these situations can go very, very bad, very, very quick.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, it's got nothing to do with us. It's just someone peddling psychology and basic things. We don't have to bother with them, but we do have to keep an eye on them as much as we can, and we have to kind of catch it quite quickly. And I remember I was over in Poland again. It was one of those jobs. It was around the same time I was dealing with the Leshy, and basically we had someone who appeared to be peddling a semi-successful healing kind of business that wasn't obviously medicinal or anything, and it all seemed to be kind of like based on homeopathy. But it seemed some people were being healed, which is usually a bit of a kind of giveaway to us.
Yeah, people usually don't spontaneously heal from things.
Especially when you're talking like some serious healing, like very, very late stage terminal illnesses.
Yeah.
These are kind of the things where once or twice, there is spontaneous healing. Sometimes the body just starts to, heal itself. It's not unheard of. But it was happening just that little bit too often. So I was obviously in the area dealing with the Leshy, and obviously with my experience as an investigator prior to that, there was no other investigators nearby. They just asked me if I could, pop in, see what was going on, see if I could find out what was going on.
Yeah.
Now, what I found essentially was a guy trying to sell the services of a bird.
All right.
But he was having a lot of trouble.
Of course, because the bird probably wasn't happy about the arrangement.
Basically, yeah. All of a sudden, he'd done some serious healing on 2 or 3 different people. But all of a sudden, the people were no longer being healed. People were no longer kind of getting healthy by coming and staring into the eyes of this bird. Because that's what his thing was. It was staring into the eyes of this bird. So, I made up a whole thing of, I've got, early onset arthritis in my elbow.
Yeah.
So could I come in, something simple, not like, it's not going to get me like big, it's not going to get in big fame dealing with me, but something that a Caladrius should be able to deal with if this was the thing, because I was expecting something like a Caladrius based on the fact that someone said it was a bird, you go in, you stare at its eyes, you feel better, and you go home. But when I kind of went in and I looked at it and I immediately recognised that this was a Caladrius, I spoke with him for a little while and kind of got an idea of what was going on. And essentially he had somehow managed to cage and capture this bird. He was feeding it, looking after it, but he was containing it.
That's not great.
No. Especially when we're talking about, what's the 2 ways in which it gets rid of these illnesses, apparently. Flies to the sun or disperses in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
But it wasn't able to leave its cage.
I mean, that's not great for normal birds even, but it sounds like it could be a serious problem here.
Yeah, essentially he didn't want to release it because he didn't want the bird to fly away and him to lose his... I was hoping he didn't want to lose his companion. What I kind of concluded at the end was he didn't want to lose his cash cow.
Oh, of course.
Because he was obviously charging quite a lot of money for these kind of things. But essentially, and this is kind of speculation because I don't really know the science behind this too well, but I think the bird essentially was, number one, very annoyed because it started biting him and other people.
No wonder.
And number 2, might have actually been full.
Full? As in full of disease?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Surely, this is kind of my own theory, but surely if we're talking about something that needs to disperse or destroy the disease, there's only so much, room in only so much space in the tank,
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Yeah. So I basically worked on the idea that essentially the bird needed releasing. So after a bit of more conversation with him, I pulled out one of our, convincing looking badges and basically just said, yeah, I'm here as part of the wildlife. Like part of the Wildlife Commission or whatever the equivalent is in Poland. I can't remember the name off the top of my head.
It's so good that nobody knows what these badges are supposed to look like. Makes things so much easier.
Yeah, and you just do it very quickly. You bring it up, you have a look. Yeah, looks official. There we go. And basically, I turned around and said to him, "You've taken a very rare bird. It's exotic. It's got diseases, etc. It's very dangerous. You shouldn't have it in the country. You're going to get an absolutely massive fine. You're going to be in the courts for years, or you can hand it over. I'll forget that we're ever here. I'll cover all of this over, and he gets to carry on with his life, and the bird comes with me."
Yeah, sounds like less paperwork at the very least.
I mean, it still ended up with loads of paperwork on my end, but that's just kind of how it goes, unfortunately. But yeah, I
mean, then you could have at least nailed him, because, sounds like kind of an ass.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. As much as I really, really, really wanted to get him in trouble, obviously I didn't want to bring, normal authorities involved in all of this.
Yeah, of course.
My interest was just getting the bird away.
Yeah.
It was about the welfare of the bird and getting it out free. So, we took it away from him, walked away. He had to find another way to scam people or try and heal them or whatever. And I took it to one of our aviaries where we basically just check it over, make sure to see if the bird is actually able to be released into the wild.
Yeah.
And luckily this one was fine. It wasn't institutionalized, it wasn't too domesticated, wasn't too injured or anything like that. We were able to release it, and now it flies around. It flies around Poland, and it's free and it's happy. The only unfortunate thing is we don't tag these birds because, again, they're quite capricious, they appear to be quite intelligent, and I really don't want to annoy one.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, so we don't tag them. But the funny thing is, and I'm surprised that you don't know this, but there are actually a few wardens who have Caladriuses as pets.
Really?
But kind of, semi-feral pets. They give them a home to come back to, they give them food, they give them water, but the creatures are free.
Okay.
They fly around and they just return to nest at their homes.
That's wild.
Not many of them. There's probably about 4 or 5 in the entire CCI. But yeah, there's a few wardens.
How do I get a Caladrius friend?
Yeah, well, you do need to go and do a couple of stints with Caladrius before they'll even sign off on that. It's not easy to get them. They won't even let me have one. I mean, to be fair, I don't really want one. I travel too much. It would feel a bit mean.
Yeah.
But they are one of those ones where we can domesticate them, but only semi-domesticated. They have to be feral. We definitely don't cage them, and we don't even really contain them unless they are actually really, really badly domesticated and they can't exist in the wild any longer. But if that kind of comes down to it, those are the ones that tend to be end up the not property, but pets of the other wardens, and yeah, they look after them, protect them, and so far I've not heard of any of the wardens needing their healing abilities, but I'm sure that probably is a bit of a bonus that sits there.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably wouldn't report that because that's just more paperwork.
That's the Caladrius, a nice, wonderful little bird to start the year off. And
fascinating.
Yeah, a nice one where we get to leave them completely in the wild.
Yeah, sounds great. That's always the best outcome for everyone.
Yeah, well, like I say, they hide themselves really well amongst the rest of the kind of the avian population. So
yeah, wherever there are doves or herons around, they're basically invisible.
Yeah, seagulls as well.
Seagulls, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I wonder if ever there was a Caladrius that stole one of my fries.
I wouldn't put it past them. You know, they would probably mimic behaviour, and probably be more successful than most seagulls at it as well. But yeah, I mean, that's the Caladrius, and yeah. Unless you've got any questions, I think that's kind of us.
Well, I think that's pretty much it. I do wonder if we shouldn't attempt to kind of do what this scammer was doing, but in a more, animal-friendly way. Like, we don't have to cage them or anything, but if we can lure them somewhere and make them feel at home in an area, maybe we should try to encourage their services in a way, but there's probably reasons why this doesn't work.
Yeah, you see, for me, it feels a little bit morally not quite right. But that's me personally, and it's one of those things where I feel like we need to know why the creatures do it in the first place.
That's
if they do it because
true.
they like to, then yeah, I could get behind that. But again, I don't know if that's how that works.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, I didn't know about these creatures half an hour ago, so I shouldn't be talking too much about what we could or should or shouldn't do. So
yeah. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for joining me, Chris, on this. If you liked what we've put out, then feel free to give us a follow, give us a rating, give us anything you would like to, call us, whatever you would like to, keep it clean. Show this podcast to other people, get them involved, get them going along, see if you can spot a Caladrius among the seagulls.
Exactly.
And
there's also a Discord that you can join to talk about the Caladrius or other things we've talked about or new things to talk about. You can suggest it there, and we will be happy to welcome you in our little community there.
Yeah, that would be great. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you later.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Goodbye.